Well, let's move on now to our Focus report. South Africa's ruling party, the ANC, will be electing its new leader this weekend, a successor for embattled President Jacob Zuma. After 10 years in power, marred by allegations of corruption and sexual misdemeanours, Zuma is set to hand over the ANC leadership with his ex-wife, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or his vice president, Cyril Ramaphosa, as the front-runners for the post. The two have strongly divergent views on the direction to take for the Rainbow Nation. But whoever wins Sunday's party vote will be faced with pressing challenges, among them land reform, education and housing. And after 23 years of ANC governance, these issues are far from resolved, as Caroline Dumais and Stefan Carstens report.
In the heart of Zululand, a family tries to keep its ancestral land. The Dunn family have owned part of this mountain for generations, but hundreds of squatters have settled here.
Above, you go all the way up, you see where the light poles are there. That's where my area starts. All those people are illegal squatters there. Beyond that, from those trees, all the way down is my place, right up to this side here. They come and intimidate the tractor drivers, and the tractor driver fears for his life, and so he leaves, he doesn't carry on.
The family feel powerless. They are all descendants of John Robert Dunn, a Scottish hunter who had 48 Zulu wives in the 19th century. They have the title deeds, but today their rights are ignored. Chris, for instance, had 17 homesteads appear on his plot. He was given a death threat and he had to leave Mandini. In 1994, the ANC promised to redistribute 30% of agricultural land, but today, less than 10% has changed hands. That's why, according to Chris, invaders are settling in.
As we're driving past, you can see these are one of the claimants that's supposed to be moved off the property. He's going ahead, he's still building.
Even the family house was burnt to ashes.
Of course, the ANC is so strong in the area, they're turning a blind eye towards the people that are living on these private lands to gain votes by allowing these projects to go on so people could vote for them. And ultimately, we are left with the problem. And as you can see, this is lush agricultural land. We can do absolutely nothing with them. If we try and do anything, they will burn our crops. So there's arson cases that have been opened up before where crops were burnt down. It's just a pure sign of, you get out of here. We don't want you here. We will take your land by force, whether you like it or not.
The ANC is about to choose a new president, and the land issue is part of the campaign. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma wants to become the next ANC president. The ex-wife of Jacob Zuma has promised radical economic transformation by expropriating land without compensation.
Whether it's for agriculture, whether it's for housing, whether it's for business, there is nothing that we can do. Clinics, hospitals, schools, we need land. Our people who are poor are not going to be patient forever.
Left-wing militants of the party cannot agree more.
People talk about the glorious constitution, which many ordinary poor black South Africans don't even feel what that constitution means. When you are poor, the constitution means nothing. When you are poor and hungry, laws mean nothing.
That's why protests are ongoing in South Africa. People are impatient, not only with the land issue, but with education a subject of contention. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's supporters want free education. The other candidate to the ANC presidency, Cyril Ramaphosa, is more pragmatic. His foundation already works with private companies on education. He wants to develop partnerships between the public and private sector to finance schools and universities.
We support education for our young people without any reservation whatsoever. And to this end, our government has committed to spend as much money as possible.
Education is not free, but the government is making an effort to finance scholars. This national fund already helps more than 500,000 students, and this year they received an extra 300,000 applications.
The demand is really increasing, and the scheme is under pressure. With a budget of about 15 billion to 17 billion is not enough. For us in South Africa to fully fund all the students that are deserving for quite some time, we need at least about 51 billion.
To keep up with the demand, the education budget should triple. So should the housing budget. Social tensions are increasing. In the townships, this leads to sporadic bursts of anger, like here in Imizamo Yetu, a village in the Western Cape, where people are demanding proper housing.
We're sick and tired to wait. We want action.
Imizamo Yetu residents will have their social housing by the end of next year. Flats will be erected, but like in any other province, authorities say they cannot build as quickly as the population grows.
We have the long-term historical claimants who, from the times of the Apartheid Group Areas Act, are awaiting restitution. We then have many people who relocated from outside of the city of Cape Town, the Western Cape, to the area in the hope of finding jobs, opportunities and access to better education, etc. As we globally see an urbanization philosophy where people are moving from rural areas to city and urban areas, that demand will keep increasing.
On December the 17th, Jacob Zuma will be replaced as the head of the party. Whether it is to be Cyril Ramaphosa or Dlamini Zuma, the next leader will inherit a difficult situation, and the coming years of governance in South Africa might prove to be the most difficult for the ANC since taking power in 1994.
Well, for more on this, let's cross to our guest, university lecturer and South Africa specialist Cécile Perrault. Hello, thank you very much for being with us on France 24. Now, the family interviewed at the start of that report descends from a 19th century settler. Is it surprising that these land issues have yet to be resolved so long after the end of apartheid?
Yes, as is mentioned, you've got three main issues, as is mentioned in the report, for the next elections. Land distribution is the first one, housing and education. In terms of land distribution, 70 to 80% of cultivated land in South Africa today are still owned by white farmers or corporations. And this unequal distribution, as you underline, is the result of centuries of colonial rule and decades of apartheid. Over the past 23 years, since the end of apartheid, there have been a lot of attempts at reform for a cost of around 50 billion rands, so quite a lot of money. But those reforms have all failed for reasons that I cannot really develop here for lack of time. But the question of land redistribution today is all the more crucial as it is being instrumentalized notably by Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the current president's former wife and candidate to his succession. Indeed, she promised that if she was elected, she would put on the table a proposal to redistribute land without compensation. And obviously, you can imagine that it leads to a certain number of fears, especially among the white farmer community.
Well, going now to education, South Africa's born-free generation is stifled in seizing the opportunities that its parents paid such a high price for. Is it a case of the country not catching up with its own progress?
Well, the problem is also, can South Africa afford a free education? Students regularly march for free education, and definitely they would seem entitled to having easier access to education. The problem is that you already have a system that is mentioned in the report as well, that a system of bursary to help poorer students. But it's difficult to imagine that the country would be able to afford a completely free educational system. Dlamini Zuma has said that she was favorable to such a system, but exactly how such a measure would be financed is unclear. And Ramaphosa, the other frontrunner, is less adamant. He does not want to alienate young voters, but he's way more pragmatic and quite hazy as to whether it could be done or not.
Now, crime was another major issue. Is that now under control in South Africa?
It's not over, far from it, but you've got so many other social problems that it's not at the forefront in those elections. In other words, people are more focused on getting a housing, getting education, and crime is indeed a problem, but probably not the first issue tackled in the current elections.
And how has Zuma survived the numerous challenges to his controversial leadership?
It's difficult to say. He's a survivor. If Dlamini Zuma makes it and becomes the next ANC president, then most probably he'll be able to finish his mandate because she will offer him a form of protection. If Ramaphosa is elected, it will be more of a challenge for him to finish his mandate and maintain himself until 2019, the next national elections.
Cécile Perrault, thank you very much for having spoken to us.
Thank you very much to you. Bye. Have a nice day.